So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about goal setting, and there will be two screencasts, and this is the first of the two. So the aim and learning outcomes for the session on goal setting is to facilitate you to support service users to create appropriate, meaningful goals for health-related behaviour change in the consultations that you do. So what I'm hoping you'll be able to get at the end of our time together is to understand a little bit of the evidence base and policy around setting goals in healthcare, be able to write SMART goals, and I'll explain what that means as we go through, and to support your service users to develop goals in your consultations. So hopefully we'll be able to get through all of that. But I'm just going to initially focus a little bit on some evidence and some policy that leads us towards goal setting. And you'll find more information in the references and further reading list. So what do we know about goal setting? So a goal is an action with a measurable result, and often with a date attached to it, or a date by which it will be accomplished. And that's a really important thing that we need to bear in mind when we are working with service users to create goals. When's it going to be done by? So that's really important. And another aspect of it that's really important is that it's a process that we work together with our service users or patients. So we're working together to create that. So it's not just our ideas, it's something that we agree with our service users. So we're working with them, very much a collaborative activity, and therefore patient-centeredness is going to be really important. So just to have a think a little bit about what it might be like when we set goals. Most of us have set goals that we have never achieved. That's because there is this gap between what we intend to do and the actual behaviour change. So this is really important for us to consider about, within our consultations, because we need to make sure that that intention to change behaviour becomes an actual behaviour change, rather than just leaving that gap between the two. We do know that goals are motivational and can strongly improve outcomes, so that's going to be really important for us. And we also know that motivation tends to be higher when a patient freely makes that decision and feels responsible for it. So that's going to be really important for us to think about, that the patient is making that decision themselves. So we need to be mindful of the language that we're hearing. I need to or I must is more about someone feeling that they're being told to. So we need to be mindful of people wanting to make change rather than it being something they feel pressurized into. We may find it very useful to use our importance and confidence scales. So we've got to make sure that the service user believes that achieving that goal is important to them. Otherwise, why would they bother? And that it's achievable, which relates to their confidence. And we'll come back to the dilemma of how difficult or easy that a goal needs to be a little bit later. So we want to check if the patient wants to make that change, it's important to them, and whether they feel able to, they have a confidence to do so. So I want to spend a little bit of time thinking about characteristics of goals. And this comes from a review paper that's quite recent, that's looked at a lot of the literature from psychology and puts that out in the situation of us focusing on how to do goals well. So this idea is approach or avoidance. So there's two alternatives. An approach goal is something that's moving towards the desired outcome. So we want people to have healthy snacks, and yeah, I'm going to have a banana for my afternoon snacks. I'm going to start having breakfast. And positive approach goals have much more positive emotions for people. It gives them that greater sense of psychological well-being. So it's something that uplifts people. They feel very positive about going towards it. Avoidance goals are something we need to be really careful with, because what they're suggesting is that people move away from undesired outcomes. So I'm going to stop having cake in the afternoon. I'm going to cut out my glass of wine every night. And you can see immediately how the difference between those two and how that's associated with many fewer positive outcomes or emotions, because I'm cutting out things I like. You know, if I didn't like having cake in the afternoon, I wouldn't have been doing it. So we're asking people to go into a state of feeling perhaps deprived, or that things that they love. We hear that people saying these things, all the best things are the ones I have to cut out. So asking people to stop their cake and their wine, actually, are quite difficult things. And so it's much more negative emotions associated with that. But actually, sometimes that's what's got to happen. So what we've really got to think through is, how can we reframe that? So it might be that we would be suggesting that I'm going to have a banana for my afternoon snack 3 days a week instead of the cake. Or I'm going to start having breakfast rather than having a donut at 10 in the morning. I'm going to have my glass of wine on 3 days a week, but on the others I will have a soft drink. It's just thinking through that, reframing it so it's not purely sounding like an avoidance goal. So another one with a physical activity, rather than playing a game on my phone after dinner, I'm going to go for a 20-minute walk. So you're not saying give up playing games on your phone, but you're saying, actually, at that time of day, I'm going to choose to do something more positive that's going to help me perhaps with my weight loss goals. So it's about reframing, ideally, because we can't avoid the need on occasions for people to cut out things that they are having that may be unhelpful to their outcomes in the long term. Another way of looking at goals is performance versus mastery. So if we're looking at performance, we're looking at something where we judge and evaluate our ability. So are we performing to an adequate standard? And if we fail to perform to that standard that we've set ourselves, we can feel like a failure. So that's quite a difficult thing for people to take hold of. So we shouldn't really be setting performance goals. So a performance goal in dietetics might be, I'm coming back for an appointment in a month, and by that time I will have lost 4 kilograms. So if that person comes back and they haven't lost 4 kilograms, they immediately feel like they have failed. And that's quite difficult for people to cope with, to pick themselves up and carry on. Even if they've lost 3.5 kilograms, they may still see it as a failure. So we've got to think about how we frame the wording of our goals very carefully. But mastery is a very different way of framing it that has a much more positive outcome. So these are goals that help us to learn things and expand the abilities that we already have, learn new skills. And challenges are accepted, they're viewed as a natural part of learning. So actually I've learned to do this differently. It was difficult on this occasion, but I found a way round it. So what we're doing is encouraging people to problem solve for themselves, and they become more actively engaged in the goal process. It can improve their self-efficacy, i.e. their belief in their ability to do something. It can improve their performance in, perhaps that's not the ideal word, but in what they're actually doing, and their knowledge around the goal that we have looked at with them. So that promotes self-evaluation as well. So this is coming from the psychology world. We do need more evidence for this in healthcare, but from a psychology world, it makes an awful lot of sense that it should be applicable to us. So that example again, don't just set a weight loss target, but a behavioural change towards that target. So have they managed to change behaviour, which will be helping towards their ability to lose weight. So that might be starting to eat regular meals, cutting down their alcohol consumption. So something very specific. So even if they haven't lost that 4 kilograms in a month, they may have come down to the within the safe limits for alcohol consumption. So it's about thinking through those different aspects of it. Another aspect that we need to think about is it a difficult goal or is it an easy one? And actually, if a goal is too easy, it doesn't actually take a lot of effort. People don't often bother with it. Whereas a more difficult goal actually is a more challenging, and some people like that challenge. So that can be really helpful. It's more intrinsically motivating. So that means within people from themselves, they're more motivated by something that is a bit challenging. So our person-centered approach is going to be really important here for trying to work out what is going to be difficult or easy for that individual. And our importance and confidence rulers may also help us to try and get that balance for someone, that the goal is challenging enough for it to be worthwhile trying to do.